Good day, everyone. I'm David, the moderator for this webinar. I welcome everyone for today's webinar, which is Advanced Excel Skills for Accountants 2024. I would now like to introduce our presenter for today, David H. Ringstrom. David H. Ringstrom, CPA, is an author and nationally recognized instructor who teaches courses of webinars each year. His Excel courses are based on over 25 years of consulting and teaching experience. David's mantra is either you work Excel or it works you. His goal is to empower you to use Excel more effectively. I would now like to hand over the floor to the speaker. Over to you, David.
Thank you, David. Hello, I'm David Ringstrom, a CPA in Atlanta. Welcome to Advanced Excel Skills for Accountants. Over the course of my time today, my goal is to help empower you to use Excel more effectively. Today's presentation will hopefully lessen some of your struggles and expand your awareness of what's possible in Excel. I will be teaching from the Microsoft 365 version of Excel today. That is because that is the newest version of Excel and always will be going forward because it is a subscription platform. I will be covering everything at least twice. I'll first walk you through it on the PowerPoint slides, which are very detailed and have numbered steps. I first walk you through it on the PowerPoint slides where everything is broken down in detail. Then I go over to Excel and carry out the techniques firsthand. So jumping into our material, I'm going to lead off with the VLOOKUP function, even though it's ostensibly an outmoded worksheet function. So VLOOKUP is the granddaddy of lookup functions, and it has 4 arguments. First is the lookup value. That's what are we looking for? So the lookup value has to reside in the first column of our list that we're searching. Next, we have a table array argument. That is the cell coordinates for my list. And you'll notice in this case, I'm selecting cells D1 through H5. And then finally, the 4th argument, I have to tell Excel, do I want an exact match or an approximate match? If you've been using VLOOKUP, most likely you've been typing out the word false. You can shrink that up and put a 0 instead. So false and 0 are interchangeable when it comes to VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP, though, has some constraints because the value that you're seeking has to be in the first column, which is not always. So match has 3 arguments. There's a lookup value, which is what are we looking for. There's a lookup array, which is going to be a single row or single column. And then there's a match type. And so 0 for an exact match, 1 for less than, -1 for greater than. So the index function, we can specify where do we want to look. That's known as an array. We can then, there's 2 optional arguments. There's a row number and a column number. So the row number, notice we're going to use the match function, figure out what row number that account for 100 is on, and then return the corresponding data from column H. And so it's a more complex formula than VLOOKUP, but we're going to see it's more resilient than VLOOKUP. Let's look at our modern function that we can use, which is called XLOOKUP. So XLOOKUP has actually 6 arguments. I'm only going to show you the first 3 initially. That is because that's all we need in order to perform a lookup. So XLOOKUP has 3 arguments. There is the lookup value. Similar to the match function, I have a lookup array. And then what's a little different is I'm going to have a return array, which will be H1 through H5. So what this is saying is look up and down the cells D1 through D5 for a match on the lookup value, and when you find it, return the corresponding cell contents from column H. I can virtually rearrange the columns by using the choose function. Now, this is not the primary use of the choose function. Primarily, the choose function is an alternative to the if function. But we can use the choose function to create what's known as an array. So the curly bracket 1, 2, that names an array. There's an argument that we can use to find the last match in a list. XLOOKUP has a search mode argument at the end that we can tell it start at the bottom of the list and work its way up and find the last match. So there's more that we can do with XLOOKUP, such as matching on multiple criteria. So what if I want to match on the combination of department B and account for 100? So the helper column would combine the 2 criteria together into 1 because VLOOKUP is not capable of looking across multiple columns. XLOOKUP can. Lookup functions are typically looking for that exact match. And so for 100 space is different from for 100. So that's where I use the length function and just rule out, okay, is there an extra space or an extra character that I'm not seeing, like a non-printable character? A feature that is in Excel 2010 and later that's called Power Query. Now, it's only kind of sort of in Excel 2010 and 13. That's because you would have to download it and install it in Excel 2010 and 13. Transform reports without having to do the work over and over again. I can, in effect, create a script that that Power Query will use to clean up the report, and then I can just simply swap out the data file each month and the data will be transformed. Now, when I click import, I'll then be presented with a navigator window. Some versions of Excel, we may find that in the applied steps list that Power Query might try to be helpful and add a couple transformation steps to the list. One of the things that I can do is I can get rid of extraneous rows. So in my workbook, the first 3 rows don't have any data that I want to keep. So I'm going to go to the home menu, choose remove rows, and tell it to remove the top rows, which will give me a dialog box from which I can say I want to get rid of the top 3 rows, and then click OK. Step 19 here, I can say use first row as headers. Now it may also add a changed type command there. In that field, I'm going to start typing the word column. I don't have to finish it. I can just start typing column. That's going to give me a list of all of the blank columns. If I clear them from the search results and click OK, that then removes them from the grid. Power Query is very prone to sending numbers back to Excel. So I have one last feature that I want to share with you, and this is the solver feature. So the solver feature is what's known as a what-if analysis tool. And what we're going to use solver for is situations where maybe you have a list of transactions. The first step that you will need to do, most likely, unless you've already done it in the past, is to enable the solver add-in. It's what's known as an add-in. So it's a tool that kind of plugs into Excel and adds some functionality. We go to the data menu. We go to solver. Our set objective cell is cell D21 because that's the one that we want to be a value of 0. We want to get there by changing the multiplier cells, which are going to be C2 through C17. So that's how we basically tell it that it has to be either a 0 or a 1. We click OK, we click solve, and it's going to identify the checks that add up to 195. So once you have those identified, you can right-click on the multiplier column and choose filter, and then filter by selected cell's value. That would then collapse the report down to just the amounts that add up to that one amount. But I'm just going to let it run because we are at the end of our time here. This does get us to the end of my prepared comments. All right, David, I think we can wrap things up. I want to thank everyone for attending. With that, I'll thank you for attending and turn it over to David to wrap us up.
Thank you, David. That does conclude the session for today. Thank you, everyone, for participating. You may all disconnect now. Have a great day ahead.